Okay, today's video we're going to talk about follow-up programs as it has to do with PPC, how to follow up somebody who's come to your site who isn't going to buy and get them to buy so your overall ROI of your PPC campaigns goes way up. I'm going to tell you exactly how much you can increase the ROI of your campaigns doing this, what you're missing out on. Basically, if you don't have a program at all, or even if you think you have a good one, I promise you I've got one that'll add to it because I've done experiments many times and many hundreds of different campaigns, saw different things working, not working. I'm going to give to you the iron, the gold clad, method for follow-up that's going to get you most of the benefit of what you're doing today with your PPC campaigns. It's pretty hard to compete with somebody in your market that has a follow-up program when you don't. This is why it's not optional, and there'll be somebody who's willing to do it most of the time. So how to have a follow-up process with your PPC campaigns that you have running, whether it's on Google or Bing, doesn't matter. Could be Facebook, whatever. To make money, and specifically make more money than you're going to get with no follow-up or a crappy follow-up. Now this is going to be for e-commerce or non-e-commerce companies alike. You guys that are on e-commerce, you guys think, well, if they're not ready to buy, screw them. They'll come back when they're ready. You're not going to make nearly as much sales that way, especially if you sell something that's fairly expensive. We're talking over $300 and not doing any follow-up. Because the higher the price, the more people are going to respond and need to ask questions first. And then it becomes more like a lead generation campaign, even though you're taking orders on your site. Okay, if you're selling a $20 broom, okay, that's a situation where follow-up is, you're not going to really do it. But you're in the hundreds of dollars range, it certainly is the case, okay? So this is not for absolutely everybody, but for respectively, anybody selling any kind of halfway expensive goods, e-commerce, and then for non-e-commerce, this is going to help you out immensely. Pick up the ROI of your PPC campaigns, get more out of the same spend you have already, or put you in position to scale your account without having your ROI go down, which a lot of people are struggling with or whatever. So anyway, I'm going to get into it. Now, it may seem obvious or not, but I consistently see the people I help as a whole I run a PPC agency here, just for full disclosure. I see the people I help as a whole become much more successful with defined, mature follow-up processes going with their PPC campaigns at the same time. Respectively, if your sales process as a whole, as you get a lead, is crummy, it's almost impossible to make money if you're trying to generate leads already. Not answering the phone, having a secretary answer that knows squat about the product or service that you're doing. So if they have a question, you have to say, well, let me see if someone's available. I'll let them call you back. You're not going to usually be able to compete given, Google's setup and these other PPC networks pretty much, but especially with Google, and Bing, they've raised the price per click to a point where they're forcing people that if you don't do a decent job with your visitors, you're just not going to make any money. And they're going to want to push all the traffic to the person that does. Because they watch if somebody calls and they go back to Google and they call somebody else. Then they'll say, oh, that person's not doing a very good job. Let's send the traffic here. Even if you pay more money, or they'll charge you so much more that they'll just knock you out. Because at the end of the day, they want to send the traffic to the people who's going to satisfy the user's needs the best and the quickest, because that gets people to want to click on ads. But respectively, when you're talking about follow-up, you should take your follow-up basically as serious as your sales process, because it's about an equal effect on how much money you're going to make as the sales process you have to handle a lead as they come in. Things like when you get a lead, whether you respond in 15 minutes, which will greatly increase, almost double the amount of lead close rate that you'll get. You can Google that, it's not disputed. There's certain things like that on the follow-up that if you're not doing, or if you don't know about it, you're losing a similar amount of money. So now here's the main thing here that you have to recognize. 80 to 90% of people, when they get to your site for the first time, won't buy right away on the first visit. Unless you're talking about a $20 broom again, people don't shop around or think about buying a $20 broom or a pack of batteries or something like that. So, respectively, you're throwing away a lot of money if you don't think about what am I going to do when they leave the site to get them back. Not only that, but when they respond, when I get a chance to actually get their contact information, what am I doing to follow up with them or whatever to get the maximum effect out of that, what I paid to get the person to the site the first time, and just actually be aware of us. With no follow-up, people forget about what they've seen on your site, and competitors get all your new customers because, again, if they're following up or they just approach them as they're thinking about it, it's easy to forget you or just be diverted their way. And you end up wasting 2 to 5 times of your ad spend as you would get if you would add a rock solid follow-up process. It really doesn't matter that much. If you take it all the way, you can see 2 to 5x difference in your numbers. I've seen it before. But you have to take it all the way. And if how far you take it will dictate how much response lift you're going to get in terms of how much ROI raising potential the follow-up process you have actually could give. Okay, so I talked about e-commerce companies already, about how you guys, if you sell anything, even $100 plus, you need some sort of, $300 plus for sure. The people who you guys doing e-commerce should you also need to have a very good follow-up process, because it also, 80% of the people still that come to your site aren't going to buy right away. So it's the people, whether you're generating leads through your PPC campaign or you're trying to sell something through an e-commerce site, the people behave the same way. They go to the site. A lot of times they're just in the initial thinking about it stage. And if you follow-up, you're not going to get very much at all out of the people that are in that mind state when they initially get to your site. And 80-90% of the people are there at any given time. Respectively, I get sort of into arguments with our clients all the time about how, just taking a step backwards here, put some frame of reference on this. They want to see PPC work right away. Everybody does, and this is human nature. You don't want to spend too much before it's working. You don't also want to wait too long because it gives you anxiety that you don't know anything about the process. You don't want to wait, and if you think you have to wait and it's not working and lose sleep, whatever. When you start advertising, there's going to be a lot of people that are in the top stages of the funnel that you're normally going to have. That PPC, when people get to your site, even if they're searching for red shoes, you still got a funnel. There's a certain time frame in which people are going to think about it before they buy on average. And it's not just a couple days. You could if you track through your attribution reports, it seems like a couple days, but I could promise you there's people that come back years later, months most of the time or whatever. And so your follow-up game is key to get those people that come to your site, the 80 to 90% to come back. But the ROI, basically what I'm getting to here is what I was speaking about before, is the ROI is going to be very low at first. And I try to explain to people, you got to realize 80 to 90, when you first click on the ads, 80 to 90% of the people that hit your page had no intention of buying right away. They're going to have intentions to come back and buy when they thought about it, talk to their wives, they got money, they get, saved money, get paid, blah, 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 blah. For instance, like for a roofing company, it's the same thing. You go something like that. The people, half or more of the people who hit the page are just thinking about getting a roof. They're not thinking about getting it now. They're just looking around because they're starting to contemplate it. And with how easy it is to Google stuff, you got to realize this is how people are to be successful. And so, like in December, January, your advertising, the numbers are poor, but nobody searches for a roof if they're not going to actually be interested in buying one. So you got to realize that there's a funnel. The people that get to your site in December, January are going to pay off March, April when normal times that you would buy a roof installation. When you turn on you're running an e-commerce company campaign, you turn your ads on, it's going to be 5 times more efficient than if you would run your campaign, the same campaign for 6 months already, because instead of just brand new people that are going to have to go through that, thinking about it process, you're going to have some people that are at the end of the process and some new. So it'll be equal, or you'll have an equal amount of people in terms of the people that come back to the site, because you have a kind of an even number of people coming back that have thought about it already and also new people coming in. So the ROI naturally will be higher. And 90% of people basically, when they do PPC starting out, they quit because they want it to work right away. But they themselves as the consumer don't act that way. You got to realize that you've got to build up your funnel. And it's going to take, technically if you ran the ad for 2 weeks, you would see and you shut it off, you'd have some people come back 3 months from now and buy from that campaign. But realistically, you don't do that. Obviously, you keep the ads running. But on top of that, we'll basically see the importance of this. What happens today is really just planting seeds for 6 months from now to get the full value out of a click or a group of clicks. What you do during that 6 months time, because there's so many people that do that, will dictate how much money you're going to make and how many are actually going to come back. So one thing I always encourage people to do, now you can call this unethical if you want, but go to your competitors' sites and I'll ask them a question and see how their sales process is. If you want to see the guy, you can go to SpyFu, you can see the top advertisers. I do 5 companies, the top 5 spenders, and just go through their sales processes and see how they handle it. Your goal is to be as good as the best person out of the 5, because sometimes people are running the ads, they got so much money coming in from people from other sources that they can run PPC at a loss. You don't want to just look at one as an example, but they'll be doing some follow-up, and not just automated follow-up like once they contact you, you put them through an email sequence that puts out a bunch of spam garbage that they don't care about. I'm talking about personalized follow-up, okay? And it makes it easy to build a program if you can already know what's the best one. Because at that stage, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to do well if you just mimic what the best person's already doing in terms of making you feel like you want to buy from being catered to so well. That's just a tip for you right off the bat here. But here's the ways to follow up that I know for a fact work really well. We also use it here at our firm because I know it works. So why would I not do it for myself and eat our own dog food, as they say here? So it's not that complicated to get that 2 to 5x. You just got to go out and actually do it. The first thing is the CRM. So people with this e-commerce business, I see a lot of times they don't use a CRM. You need to be tracking your customers as they come in, so you can communicate with them and you can score them. Some people, they're going to try to be a wholesaler. Well, you need to treat them separately if you want to get the full value out of what you're doing. If you just let them come back on their own and they contact somebody else and somebody else follows up with them, who do you think they're going with? So whether you're an e-commerce or non-e-commerce, unless you're, again, selling the $20 broom, you should have a CRM system to collect your customers and track how much they're spending. And then the top 20% of the spenders should be handled with like a white glove level service to get that person, instead of spending what they're spending, but 2 to 3 times more, because that's definitely possible. I've seen it done, and I've got videos about this as well. But respectively, as those leads come in, like I said, you try to score them, and the people that score the highest, you're the most likely to buy more or to buy in general as they come in, you focus on them more. That way, when you have somebody you're paying to follow up these leads, because the reason why people don't do it is because they think they don't have enough money to do it. And realistically, it comes down to numbers. You just got to try it and see it for yourself, and then you'll understand why it's stupid not to have somebody do this. But if they're following up the best leads first, it gets a lot more efficient than just following everybody up indiscriminately, so that ultimately you can have one person follow up basically 5 times as many people because they're basically always catering to the ones that they need to cater to at any time. But more so than that, when you follow somebody up, a lot of times they don't have a process to know when to follow up next. So they have a high score. What you need to do is you follow them up and you try to not pound them and say, are you ready to buy today yet? Oh, okay, see you later. You build rapport with them. Is there anything else I can do? And then you record what their concern is at the time, and then you mark a date to follow up them again. And then on that date, you have a message that comes up for that person who's in charge of the follow-up to follow up with them again at that time. And then you just have a friendly conversation with them. And sometimes it'll be 3 years later until they buy. But if you score the leads, you know exactly which ones to focus on with your limited time. And in general, when you follow up next time, even though it's been 6 months, you know exactly what to say to make that person feel like, you know, this company really does care about me, and therefore their product's probably just as good as well, or just service just as good as well. And you just keep doing that. And so you're not throwing any one lead away if it's good. You realize that there's a process. You can't rush the process. People are going to do it on their own terms. I mean, you can obviously, it's not true to some degree. You could push people and to stop procrastinating by throwing in there once in a while, hey, we're running a promotion this month. We're giving you 20% off everything. Just thought you'd like to know because I knew you were interested before, and you could get people to procrastinate less. But that's not your primary reason and what you're using as your follow-up. You sneak that in once in a while because that works to build your overall system and get the maximum out of it. So that's one component, but mainly it's just about building rapport. And there's a saying, kind of in the sales community, like they either buy or die. So as you're following up, if that person, you're trying to build rapport, you're not trying to kill the lead, because as soon as you start going too aggressive at them, then they're going to start ignoring you. But if you try to go in with a helping hand, they'll like the fact that you're staying in touch with them, and you're basically reserving your spot as they're going to buy from, if they're going to buy from you. Sometimes they won't, sometimes they will, but you want to be able to get 100% buy rate from somebody once they've shown interest, because you've given them a little bit more attention than the competitor did, and therefore now when they had trouble deciding, it was about equal. They didn't know for sure who to decide to go with. They're going with you every time, because that's basically what people do, because they're going to go with who they trust the most, and whoever they trust the most is who's going to do this specific task better, or at all, we'll say. But when I say buy or die, that means you follow up with them, and if they say, well, I'm not sure, maybe later, you set a reminder for 6 months or a year, and you follow up. But you never give up on them until they say, like, F you, stop contacting me. You follow them up for the next 10 years if you have to. And what you're doing in this, if you're using a CRM, you're built up a list of hundreds of people in which this person can score the leads so they know which ones to follow up first. And there's a specific methodology to get all those people that contacted you to buy from you at 2 to 5 times the rate that they would have otherwise if you didn't have this system going. And that's just how it is. And I know you're saying it's too expensive to do that. I don't have people to do that. Just do the math. If you were to get double even out of every lead that you got, what's that going to earn you? And realistically, it probably takes one person to do this. It could be 5 hours a week to start with, and as you eventually get more sales, it'll be a full-time job eventually for somebody, but at first it's not, because you don't have that many contacts built up. As you get more contacts and more data, more contacts, it becomes a bigger job, but then it works better. You keep getting more and more sales. So that right there should be able to double the ROI on the leads that you have. So if you're e-commerce, of the people who call or email you before they buy, they'll buy 2 times the rate. If you're just doing lead generation, you're not an e-commerce company, they'll buy it 2 times the rate if you follow up like this. So that's already a huge thing that you can do, and I just gave you the exact formula for that. If your competition's doing that, that's probably a good reason why you're not able to make the level of ROI that you want, trying to get an 8-to-1 return or a 10-to-1 return. of $10 revenue to $1 ad spend, then that could be a key reason why. If no one's doing it and you do this, obviously you'll have a greater effect even yet, and you may want to that might be your key way to get over the threshold so you can be profitable, things pay for themselves, and you can start to scale. The second thing is about regards to remarketing. Remarketing to all the people who come to your site, also using a scoring system. So I've got lots of videos about remarketing, but essentially what you do is you have a series of ads that show up for every single person who gets, well, not every single person, but presumably every person that gets to your site. I do every person, but respectively, when somebody comes to your site, they're looking for, custom brass fittings. They're not there for fun, right? They were there with an intent to buy either now or sometime in the future. You've tagged them as such. If you don't follow them up with remarketing display ads on Google Display Network, and I also do Facebook as well in case the people spend a lot more time on Facebook, you're just not going to get another 2x potential out of those leads. What you do, and this part's, there's no reason not to do this one because it's automated once it's set up. Yes, it's a little bit of a pain to set up, but once it's there, it just works automatically to where I'm going to have an ad that has a testimonial speaking of the brass fitting product that they were looking at. And then next day, they're going to see an ad that shows another testimonial for that product with a headshot, their comment, and their name. If we can do it, that's going to be the maximum way to do it for believability. Then I'm going to have another ad that shows up for the next day that has what our reviews are on Google and Yelp and whatever for your industry. That's for your industry, a review site. And then I have another ad that shows up that says why our brass fittings basically are better and how we make them, that kind of thing. So you're telling the user a story in these ads why your ads are better. Your competition won't be doing this. Everybody's too lazy to do this. The agencies don't want to do it because it cuts into their profit margin. The companies themselves don't do it because they don't realize they can double the ROI by doing this. Double the ROI of the new traffic that comes in, which is what this is about. It's not about generating a sale from the remarketing itself, because basically people see the ads, they see your testimonial, they're not going to buy right there from that, but it goes into you can feel like it's almost like a glass that you're filling up. You fill the glass up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and eventually when it gets to the top, they buy. And a lot of times they don't need to click through on your ad to get yourself up a notch. Most of the time they don't. They're reading an article, they see your testimonial, they say, and then they just keep going back to reading what they're reading. Therefore, the ROI, if you're tracking the ROI on your remarketing campaigns, is not going to be that great. But what it will do is get the people that you paid from a Google search that are looking to buy but are now contemplating it to buy at a higher rate. So you have these ads. Basically, if you have 10 products or services, 10 unique products or services on your site, I'm going to create the ad sequence I told you there for each product or service that I have, because it works so much better. If you're going to show me a testimonial that somebody gave the product I'm looking at specifically versus, about the company in general, that's obviously going to have so much more impact in convincing me that this is the absolute company I need to be going with if I'm going to be picking anybody. And if you have 10 or more products or services, then you basically just do one set of ads, and then you do testimonials that speak of the brand itself, because there's two things in terms of regarding trust that you have to get the level of trust you need so that you become the vendor of choice for that person. It's, do I trust the company, or should I say trust the product? So if you can't speak to the product because you have too many, you speak of the company, and that'll get you some as well. Technically, if you set up ads that speak about the product they were looking at, and then they saw some other ads that spoke about the company, then you would get even more trust from that person. Like, it goes off the charts at that point. So you get the point. Now, when I talk about a scoring system here, you can actually literally, through Google Analytics and the audience, where you define an audience there, you can actually set it up so that if they call, and you'd have to have CallRail to do this, integrated with Google Analytics, if they call, they're on a certain audience list. if they fill out any contact form on your site, they're on an audience list. So basically, if they get to the site but they haven't contacted you already, you may not decide to do any of this because you have a lot of tire kickers. If you don't have a lot of tire kickers, I recommend anybody who gets to the site, 90% of the time that's what I'm doing, because I know it pays off anyway, because when you're paying $3 for a click and it costs a penny to have an ad show up for somebody after, well, obviously that math works. So respectively, so I'll still tier it out. I'll have an audience for people who came to the site, did not turn into a lead. They got to the site, they became a lead, but they did not buy. And then I'll usually also have somebody who bought, so I can speak to them specifically again. But respectively, for purposes of this video, I'll have it at least separated out to they're not a lead yet and they are a lead. And the reason why I do that is because when I have tracking set up, I can see how much revenue the audience that's already contacted us again is bringing us, and I can bid more per click to have the ads show up a little bit more often and win placement in front of that specific prospect of that type than if somebody who's just came to the site and did not get that far. That's not real important, but it does help get a higher ROI, because some sites it costs a lot more to have your ad show up there, and if I only go to certain sites, if you bid 50 cents, you may not be able to show up there, whereas if you bid $1, you would. And if you segment out your traffic so that you could bid, to where you can just define how much, if they are a lead, bid a little bit more because you know that it'll be worth it there, then obviously you're going to get a bigger impact for what you're doing here. So for e-commerce, I'm doing, did they come to the site, subscribers, did they contact us by phone or email? That's one tier. Did they get to the cart? That's one tier. And then after they bought, their customer, that's a tier. And I'm bidding differently for each one of those segments. For a lead generation site, it's generally just did they come to the site and did they become a lead, and that's it. But getting a little bit off track here, you could score those leads and then you could go after people more aggressively based upon them being a lead, given there's a huge potential with the people that already had enough motivation to contact you already, that you should really be going after them, because you can double the overall ROI of somebody who's contacted you for a question of some sort by phone or through a contact form on your site somewhere. That you definitely want to do that. Respectively, in a lot of markets, you're going to be able to double the ROI from the person who doesn't even contact you yet. And I would have these remarketing ads running anyway, just anyway in general. So, but this is just as important as the CRM, okay? Because this specifically works on building trust and building up the user's knowledge base a little bit. If you have a specific, unique feature of your product or service that makes it superior to other companies, these remarketing ads can also say that. And the great thing about the remarketing, because it's literally a penny to have the ad show up, is you can say it 50 times to the person, even though they won't see it most of the time, because people ignore ads. That's what their mind is trained to do, but they'll see it a few times, and through the repetition, it'll drill into their mind to the point where you're basically brainwashing them to realize, in a good way, that your product is different and it's superior in this way, that you should actually know this, because if you're going to buy the product, you don't want to have it something without this. So you're basically forcing them to recognize that. So the day, ultimately 3 months later, the time comes where they know they want to buy today, you've done all the pre-work for them to already know who they're going to buy from. You've done the work up front. Now the sale goes to you. Okay? So you get the general idea there. But those are the two things. You do this, you have a 2 to 5x ROI increase potential from the people that already contact you and you're not really doing much with, so you can make a lot more money from your PPC campaigns in general. Now this last thing I'll just mention here, real life sales occur months or years after people contact you, and respectively, if you do sell to somebody and people buy more than once from you, the value of that customer is not going to come in for years a lot of times, because the rate in which the click cost and your competition knows, the value of the customer is worth more than their initial sale. You will not be able to get the true value out of that click, probably because of the rate in which the clicks are up then for a while. So don't limit yourself by looking at the ROI of what your ad account shows, even with the revenue tracking or with the conversion tracking set up on your account. A good tip that I could give, this is what I'm going to do for my own business. If I run something else besides an agency, this is what I give advice to a lot of clients. You want to prove that this works, go ahead and put your last 3 years of revenue into a spreadsheet by month and your ad spend next to it. Go ahead and start instituting this policy here and watch how much your revenue goes up over the next 6 months. Why do you do it by month? Because obviously there's seasonal adjustments you have to take into factor. But you'll see that your March beats the previous March, and April beats the previous April, but by a little bit more than what March beat March the previous year, and so forth, and it'll keep climbing. And so as you're trying to justify this to yourself, having a full-time person doing follow-up, you'll be able to easily quantify what it's worth. Because, long story, what I'm trying to say here is the conversion tracking it's far from perfect. It's good enough to be able to tell if I want to bid more for male versus female or this keyword versus this keyword, but it's not at all situated for telling what the ROI of a campaign is. You got to kind of do that on your own. And what a lot of times we do is I'll tell the client, okay, is there a certain ratio of revenue of the total sales that your company has through the cart or in general to the ad spend we're spending, that if I stay within that margin, would you be okay with it? And then so a lot of times they'll say, if you can keep the ad spend only 9% of our total sales, you can actually spend as much as you want. And that's the easiest way for me to scale an account, because I'll do stuff like this, see the revenue go up. Now, because the revenue went up, and instead of us being at a 9% marketing cost, we're at a 6% marketing cost. Now I can pour on more new traffic, which brings up the total revenue even more. And then eventually, when I can't pour any new traffic on again, then I work out ways to be more efficient, like updated the landing page, whatever. You can walk up, a site from doing $1 million a year to $10 million a year easily with that method. You just got to figure out what you can afford to invest out of your total revenue on PPC, and then you just use the strategies like I just gave you of this video and other videos, and watch through your how your sales are going by month, climb so they don't climb anymore, then institute another strategy, and then basically you're guaranteed to be able to get your campaigns to scale that way. If you're not at the level of ROI that you need, you do this stuff until basically you are, then you can obviously scale. But don't limit yourself to what the ad accounts are saying you're making, because it's not a great judge at all of what you're actually making. It's where it is good is like the $20 broom example, because the tracking's pretty good if you're going to buy right away or not at all. But when you have the longer it takes from the person to decide on average, which it's way longer than the average person thinks it is, that's advertising on Google, like I said and I told you about before, you got to realize you're going to have to keep tabs of what this is actually really producing for you by looking at your overall sales and how that is situated as a ratio of sales versus the ad spend you're spending. The other thing is, particularly when you spend over $10K a month on Google, your organic rankings go up a lot. I've seen this time and time again. So your goal is to be able to spend as much as possible, right? Because and still obviously have the ads pay for itself, because if you spend so much, now you'll get all this free traffic. And now half of the cost of what you spend on the ads is subsidized or supported by the organic traffic that you're now getting. Okay, so there's a lot more to consider than just not only is the tracking not that accurate in terms of telling you what your exact profit level is on your ads just by looking at the Google tracking or Facebook tracking. It brings in organic traffic, which is a big one. Obviously, you start getting referrals. It's to make your determination on can I scale should be done with the 3-year by month revenue method that I told you, and coming up with a ratio of overall sales to ad spend. And once you can do that and you have someone trained to be able to, where you could say, spend all you want as long as we maintain 10% marketing cost here. And if you know what strategies that work, you just, you go to town with it. So anyway, that's now real relevant to getting more ROI out of your that leads, if you will, that you have come to your site, asking questions, or the leads in general that you have. But it tells you how to justify what I'm doing here, given you may need a person to help you set up the ads, have somebody and make the ads better, adding more ads to your remarketing, adding remarketing ads for every product that you have, doing the follow-up like I said, so you can see that it's worth it to you. And as you go ahead and try other things, that's a great way to tell before and after what you did, was it profitable or not? That's my trick that I have. And try to use that on every account we actually work on in terms of when we're in the scaling mode to actually see, can we scale to the next level? Are we ready yet? So anyway, that's the whole thing. If you like the video, I have a lot of other videos on this channel about other PPC money-making strategies, like I said. You should check those out definitely if you want to make a lot of money with PPC. Learn how to do that. I have a blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog with step-by-step instructions on how to build campaigns that are guaranteed to work basically every time. If you want to see what we're doing there, what I'm using on clients' accounts, you can go there and find that kind of information there. If you have any questions about this strategy, things that you think I should have covered or didn't, leave me a comment down below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a comment on this channel within a day or two time typically. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you on my next video that has another great PPC strategy on it in another day or two time. Take care.